Welcome to another edition of Flobo Saw It on Netflix, and that's the show where we go into the Netflix library to find out what's going on. A couple weeks ago, I made a call out to the social media networks. I said, hey, look, June is your friend Flobo's birth month. I want to celebrate with people that are near and dear to my heart and talk and discuss movies, documentaries, TV shows, what have you. So all month of June, we're going to have ourselves a grand old time. And today, I'm being joined by, I guess, one of my most decorated guest hosts. Has been on almost every show I've ever created, but he's here to talk about the death and life of Marsha P. Johnson. Give it up for James Lott Jr.
I have been on, just except for wrestling.
There's always time, brother.
That's the only show I've not been on your. I know. I'm like, I've been on all your other shows except for the wrestling ones. Yes, that's rude.
We'll totally make that work. But today on this podcast, we are talking about the death and life of Marsha P. Johnson, the documentary series that aired or was released the end of 2017, but kind of landed on Netflix in 2018. IMDb gives it a rating of 7.3 out of 10. Rotten Tomatoes 73%, so pretty even. That almost never happens. Thoughts about it overall, there, James Lott Jr.
I learned a lot. This is my I think it's American history, but specifically it is LGBTQIA plus, I'm going to say everybody in there, history that wasn't told to many of us. I knew nothing about it until actually right before the documentary. Did not know who she was, and I know what her part was she played, and I've been around a long time, and I think now, like I've been around a while. But I think I look back and I think I've heard the name here and there bandied about, but not discussed in any kind of major way. So I was very happy to find this documentary, and it was very, it's kind of sad. It's also historic. It's a struggle. It's about a struggle, and she is one of many that she's representing from that time period. But I liked it a lot. It's very informative. I liked it a lot. What did you think?
You know what? I've heard certain things before going into it. Now we're talking about things going into it. I knew the importance of Stonewall. I mean, I went to New York City about 3 or 4 years ago, and the site still, I don't think hallowed ground. Everyone kind of knows. Yeah, everyone kind of knows what happened there. Marsha P. Johnson specifically was someone I wasn't familiar with. And so that was an interesting story, and learning more about, and again, I say this as I always say, a garden variety heterosexual cisgendered male. And it is Pride Month, but the little bit of a divide between gays and members of the transgender community, especially in New York at the time, was something I never even thought about, of how deep this history goes. So I enjoyed it. We go into more the nitty gritty of it all, but definitely one thing I want to talk to you first about, though, was the pace. Usually Netflix documentaries are like flashbang, like sweeping scores. This was very, very muted, almost a different change of direction.
Well, because also it was a CSI, so to speak. Oh, hi, Nikki Bailey. I love you, Nikki.
Hey, Nikki.
It was like CSI also, because she's trying to get justice for her. She's trying to find out what happens. The main character, so to speak. I'm saying it just because she's not a character, she's a real person. Trying to, they're telling the story as she's trying to piece things together. It had a very different pacing, very different tone, very different everything. I mean, you're right. It's very different than the normal Netflix stuff.
Right? Yeah, normal Netflix. So let's talk about the mystery of it all. Like, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance was something that could have been told in a many different way. People had different theories of what was going on. And so you had, was it Victoria Cruz's investigation going in there, just trying to uncover things. And she was, to one character or one other person's perspective, was kind of playing detective. I was on the edge of my seat, not so much to find an answer, but I hope that she was doing it safely,
There were times I felt for her too, going, ooh, you're going to that play, you're trying to check this out, and you don't know if it's safe or not. I mean, that's the fearlessness of many members of our community. It's just kind of, and I'm gonna say this, and you're black, I'm black.
We're black and black.
Watchers are black. They're black and black. I'm black. I'm especially black this month, especially. No, my problem with the LGBTQIA movement, it's been very whitewashed. So finally, we're getting Black voices. You know, I grew up with Marlon Riggs. If you don't know who he is, Google him. Tongues and Tide changed my life.
Yeah.
You know, things like Paris is Burning, which of course influenced Pose. It just ended last Sunday. I mean, there is not so many crispy. I'm extra crispy, Nikki. Extra crispy. I know, but I mean, it's like there's a lot of stories that were taken out from that. A lot of Black and brown folks were a part of. I was a part of the movement 30 years ago, and I'm curious to see what happens when things get written. Will I be included in some of the stories? And I've been included in a few, but it's like it seems like though they go to the non-Black brown person first, and they kind of showcase them so much. But there are a lot of Black and brown folks, and that's what so I'm glad we have Victoria Cruz. Kind of like she was the leader of this documentary, trying to find out what's going on with another person who's very important in gay history, who happened to be of color.
It's an interesting point you bring this up. And again, I gotta put it out there. I'm a heterosexual male, not trying to speak for anyone in the community, but when you have people on the LGBT side who happen to be white, a lot of times there is a propensity to mirror that movement with the Black civil rights movement. But for me, that always rubbed me the wrong way, because you're kind of discounting actual Blacks who have to deal with it both ways. And so I always wonder is that considered as a microaggression as someone inside that community as well? Or is that just me being like, wait a minute?
Well, I mean, it's hard because I'm Black. I always say this, and it may be controversial. I'm Black first. That's what everybody sees. That's what everyone looks at. My facial features, my skin color. You see African American. That's what you see first. Anything else after that, I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. I'm this. I'm that. I mean, I'm many different things. But you see this first. So I have an attachment to both movements. Clearly, I have an attachment to both this movement and that movement. The gay and the civil rights movement. There were gays in the civil rights movement also that got kind of pushed aside.
Right.
Because they were gay. So it's one of those things where it's like these are both human rights movements, but they're different because being Black, you are solely being discriminated against. We were brought here. That's another story. But we were brought here as property.
Mm-hmm.
Gay is something. It was more of a psychological thing for Americans. Like, this is psychological. This is a weird, like, we don't give rights to people who think they remember, it wasn't until 1973 it was considered a mental illness, mental disorder by the psychological association. So it's like weird. So that's a slightly different thing than just being based on you can't drink out of this fountain because you're Black. Right. It's a different. There are similarities. I think it's a little different. So what you're saying, I'm kind of going, I'm both those things too. Okay. So I go back and forth also. I don't know if there's a right answer specifically, but I just know that for me, it's kind of like I go back and forth also because I know that there's a lot of racism in the gay community. It's a lot of racism in the gay community. I was so shocked, but we know the whole, there's a hierarchy there too. When you're oppressed by the major oppressors, then you oppress the ones you think about. I mean, it's almost a Latino. So I know the whole Latino thing. Well, Mexicans are worse than Puerto Ricans. I mean, it's the whole feeling better than someone else, and that's kind of what goes on.
I'm glad you mentioned. Well, it's a whole other show, but it kind of isn't, because I do feel like everyone on this planet, at least in society, wherever that be, you can exist outside society, wants the same thing. They want to be safe. They want to be able to raise a family. They want to be able to have a good time. But at the same time, it always feels like, hey, how did you people get in? How did your culture get in? Don't let them in. And we're kind of like fighting based on how we describe ourselves and how we identify ourselves, which I thought was something that was a through line in this particular movie itself, because it really wasn't so much like, hey, respect us. It's like, hey, we want to be able to live and to drink where we want and to party where we want and to have the same rights that we want. These are very small things we should be able to clear, but they always seem to have so many people, so many detractors being like, no, how dare you?
Right, no, right. And the thing with people like Marsha and other trans women or even trans men, but I know there's folks like Marsha, people can't get over the fact of that. It's just that it's the plumbing. It's the they can't get over that. Mm-hmm. And so that's that barrier. And so for Marsha and them who are out there, I mean, like literally, I mean, they could be killed, you could be imprisoned in jail for just dressing with making your hair long, wearing a dress, putting on makeup, and saying I'm a woman. Just saying that. I mean, we still have problems with that today, but it was even worse back then. It was scary. I don't. To me, it was their bravery and her bravery to go out there and speak out in public, about wanting rights. That's just I mean, and to be a person and to be a woman of color, be a Black woman to do this back then. Back then, to me, it just takes such bravery and courage. That's what I got from this documentary, especially. It's like she was trying to work it out. I mean, she was trying to, her and others like her were trying to work it out.
So getting to the movie itself, favorite scene or a part exchange that stuck out for you? There's certain moments where you go, damn.
The whole movie was like that for me.
Yeah, I know, wasn't it?
It was like there was show. I love that he had the footage. It's like it's funny to watch the footage because the old either reel to reel or they had the old we call them cameras.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know they had that footage, some of the footage of her out there and others like her out there. So it's I was like, oh, I was more. I mean, we're producers, we're people who do stuff like this. So I'm always kind of like, oh, they actually filmed that, or they filmed her talking, or they filmed that demonstration, or the first Pride March. They actually filmed this stuff. Okay, got it. I didn't know that footage was out there. So for me, it was more like, oh. I mean, every time it was interesting.
Yeah. How's the personality, in your opinion? How was Marsha's personality?
It was like people I knew myself coming out, people I knew. I mean, it was very, very just like it made me think back to my early days and some of the trans back then they were called male to female or FTM. They were called different names back then.
Yeah.
But that I befriended when I was like this 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old. And most of them are dead from AIDS at this point. It made me sad. It made me nostalgic and sad because it's like I remember them, and they were so strong and feisty and bitchy and shady and loving and all these things that I am myself. I know I'm those things too, but I carry it just a different way. I'm all those things. But when I care about somebody, if you're in my circle, you're in my circle. And that's it. You're in my circle, Flo. You're in my circle. I don't care if you're straight or this. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, it doesn't matter. You're in my circle, and that's how it was back then. So seeing this and seeing Marsha's personality, she was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for the circle. She was fighting for the village. But she reminded me of people back in the day that I used to know that are now not here anymore.
That is a very poignant statement. That's interesting because it does feel like it was a different shift, and as the movie progressed of who Marsha was. It was like almost like it was like legend person. Can I say martyr? Is that an appropriate term in a way? I mean, I feel like it kind of transitioned to the part of the hour and 40-minute runtime. But my favorite scene, which is, I guess, I can show how New York I am, was when Victoria was sitting with Julius, and Julius was explaining how the mob worked gay clubs, and like it wasn't for the top mobsters, it was for the mobsters' nephews. I was like, oh my gosh, I was so inspired to write a whole story about that. One of my favorite games is Grand Theft Auto: The Ballad of Gay Tony, where Gay Tony owns both a straight club and a gay nightclub, and he goes, "Oh, I own the city, but all the gangsters and thugs are after." I'm like, that would never happen, but I'm literally hearing this right now. Is there any aspect the mob was not involved in New York City at that time?
Back then, my grandfather knew some mob people. He did. There were a couple of restaurants because we would go into. There was one called again. Well, they're not in business anymore, so I can say it. I don't know. And this is all allegedly. I don't know if they had any mob ties or nothing. I don't know nothing. I'm just saying. We walk into places like the Richelieu and stuff, and they're like, Robert. They knew who he was. Yeah. He had cigars in his hand. I mean, these folks had no necks, and they were just like, they had thick New York accents, track suits. Also, you saw in Sopranos, that's what I saw, and they all looked like my father. And it was just like, and I'm just like, I don't know what they do for a living, but there's something, and he would allude to things. But it was, I mean, back in the 70s and 80s, I'm sorry, I loved New York back in the day. I like when it was dirty. I like when 8th Avenue and Times Square. I did. I said, why did cops have to like clean it up? I'm just like, I loved it when it was dirty, and it was just like, to me, New York was always supposed to be this gritty city. So yeah,
Right.
so in the documentary, that was fun to see the. Well, also it talks about back then when it was a gritty city, and
Yeah.
it was extra dangerous for people like Marsha. It was extra dangerous for that back then.
I think he says Dirty Dixie was the best. I kind of agree. So I grew up I came of age in the 90s. And so like that was the process of it being cleaned up. But like Coney Island was the last part of New York City to get that. So as a kid, I remember back when the boardwalk was open. You could walk under the boardwalk and see everything that's shady. And that's something kids my age should never have seen before they filled it in. Before they filled it in, it was like,
that's the thing, Flobo. That's the thing is that when you were raised in when you went to, because I started going to New York in the late '70s, obviously. So, but New York was this tough place. Like my mom said, she rode the subway at 10 or 11 years old to go to school. Like it was just like you grew up faster there at some level. It's a concrete jungle. So different than Los Angeles. We're at the beach and we're like eating ice cream cones and and swimming. It's very different, and so that's why I think about New York. That's what it's supposed to be. You kind of probably should have seen some of this that you saw, but that's part of the experience of growing up in New York.
And if you're listening to this now, not be from New York, that's why we're so mad when we see it all gentrified. I don't want ancient greens.
Like, or yoga places. Like, why is there a yoga place here in Fort Hamilton Parkway, next to where it used to be the West Indian Market? I mean, I don't understand what's going on. So, yeah,
that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Have you ever had a situation where you were on a mission or an adventure, and when someone's like, "Yo, you should probably not do this. You should probably chill out and just focus on yourself." Like, no, I'm going to find the truth, like Victoria Cruz was.
That's a great question. I have several times in my life, and that's my. I've done a lot of things in my life. Just happened when I was born, the time I was born. A lot of things I was told, you probably shouldn't do that, or you probably should just turn around and go back. Don't go for that job, James. Don't try to move up the corporate ladder. This is in the 80s, this is in the 90s. Maybe you shouldn't try to go to that neighborhood and get the job or live there. A place I was told not to. And I remember I was trying to find a place in Sacramento of all places.
Yeah.
So I was told, I know, whatever. And I was told in a neighborhood that's a little nicer that I probably shouldn't go there because I'm a certain shade of brown.
Wow.
If I was, my father is very, very light skinned. He said, I'll go for you and I'll get the place for you. And I said, no, I'm going to go as myself. And he said, well, either you'll get turned down, you may get beat up, you may get, all kinds of, this was back in the 80s, all kinds of stuff can happen to you in this neighborhood. And I said, no, I said, I have to stand up for myself and do this. Also, I had a friend who was murdered, who was a drag queen, not trans, but a drag queen, back in the early 90s in Sacramento. Yeah. And me and my friends decided to go after him, we found the person actually who did it.
Wow.
And brought him to justice. But we decided to kind of, because there was somebody who was in our community who did it. And we think it was one of those things, just they're trying to rob her or whatever, just whatever happened. And I was told, James, you shouldn't do that. You may know where you live, and I was just like, no, we got to do it. I'm a village person, so we got to help the village.
There's a word that gets overused there, but that's like what true heroism is, right? Being like, yo, I know the risk, and my heart's in my chest, but I have to do this. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's a thing where you really. When I joined ACT UP Sacramento in the late '80s, also it was scary to me because we were going to places and risking our lives. I've never been arrested. Actually, of all things, I've never been arrested. But I've had guns pointed at me. I've had police. I've had all that happen. But it was like it almost takes over because it is life or death in some ways. It really is life or death. It really is that serious. I mean, and something just takes over with you and you goes, I can't stop. I couldn't stop if I wanted to. And that's how many of us thought. Now look at the Marsha P. Johnson. They couldn't not fight for their rights.
Yeah.
They just couldn't. Because how are they going to live? You can't live. You're being restricted. So you got to unrestrict yourself.
It did seem, at least for me, and again, maybe because I'm incredibly cynical, New York, hello, that it was Marsha and a lot of people in that group were allowed to talk all they want to until the money got involved. Until it was like, look, man, this organization's skimming money up the top. Like, where are our rights? Where's our pay? And then it became kind of ominous of what happened to her. And I always wonder, how long does it take? Do we realize that our institutions are to divide or to suppress usually have a monetarily element combined to it? And so it was cool to see that, like almost in an alternate universe. Like, this happened before, y'all. Like, it can happen again.
Yeah. Well, everything old is new again. That song.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very true. And I have talks with younger gays, and I tell them what you're going through now went on 30, 40 years ago when I was your age. I mean, like it's completely for all the changes, a lot remains the same, and it's perpetuated just generationally. And we now, I think now we're aware of all of it. I mean, they were aware of it back then too. They just didn't care. I think now we're aware of it. Hopefully now care and will help change things. But back then, people knew what was going on. And there was lots of divides. And the gay community was not really that united. And I think there was a lot of stuff that was going on also. Hey, girl, that was going on. And Marsha, you know, there were folks who didn't like Marsha. And there were folks who probably didn't want to see her talking. They didn't want to see her up there. They didn't want her representing the movement. I'm sure. I'm sure.
How'd you come across the documentary? Was it like an algorithm thing that a friend put you on?
No, it was. And so people were talking about Marsha P. Johnson a couple of years ago, and then this year, I was like, I want some gay and lesbian documentaries. I literally went into Netflix and typed in, whatever, like, yes, and it popped. I put it in my queue, and I put several in my queue. And I love documentaries. I'm a huge documentarian fan. I love them. And then I decided one day, and I finally watched it this year. I hadn't watched it. I watched it. I know it came out in 2017. I finally watched it this year. I got blacker this last year. So I was trying to find out more black stuff. I was like, I don't know how to put it. I got blacker, and I'm like, I want more black stuff. And I literally, that's what I did. And I sought out content, especially that was gay and black. I wanted to see what was that, and or just kind of queer and black, I should say. And when I found several things, it's one of the things I found.
So, like I said at the top of the show, IMDb has it at 7.3 and Rotten Tomatoes has it 73%. Almost never these two things are in agreement, because that's why I cite them both. Thoughts about the movie? If you had to give it a rating, what would you do? What would you give the rating of The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson?
I give it like a 9. I always want to give it a 10. It's not. I mean, it's not perfect. There are other things, but I mean, it was nothing bad. But I give it like a 9. Give it a 9.
And you recommend to a friend?
Oh yeah, no, definitely. I would recommend it to every person, whether you're straight, gay, black, white, whatever, but especially to my other gay, black and brown brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews and cousins. I think you should do this because, again, it's not, you won't learn it anywhere else. You're not going to be taught anywhere. So you have to kind of know your history, and have reverence for your history. There are people who came before you who some lost their lives. Just try to be who they are. That's sad. It happened today.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'll say more of an 8 out of 10. The people I recommend it to are those who are into crime pieces. The fact that here's someone that can actually disappear in a city of 7 million people, and you have to ask yourself why. But that said, I do think that as a heterosexual person, being understanding of like, man, heterosexuals were pretty intolerant, man. Like, what the hell? I'm not saying things have changed. Things you can say there's some progress there, but like the way that they voiced their concerns was absolutely abhorrent, to use a term and phrase. And this is my hometown, But I do think if you're into crime, if you're into civic leaders, if you're into that kind of piece of having everyone encroach someone to see whether or not they can survive what they believe in, this one will here be one to check out. So.
I agree. And I appreciate you actually taking time to watch it and be open to watching something like this. I know it's very different. It's Pride Month, but I know you're an ally. And so I mean, I would be talking to you weren't. So I appreciate that you took the time to watch it. I think it was good.
It was fun, man. Not like fun in the thing, but really fun of how we have these heroes that are just in plain sight, really, and we find a way to, in some ways, get rid of it. I meant to make this about relevant thing, but like I was reading this article this week about Texas, and they passed a bill to reestablish patriotic education. And I'm like, what the heck is that? You know what I mean? I don't think Marsha P. Johnson will be in any textbook, if that makes sense, So like any knowledge is great.
I know. Any knowledge is great. That's the thing. There are certain things they don't want in the textbooks because they weren't in there in the first place. So of course, patriotic. It's the funny thing is all of this. As we put a button on all this, of course, all of this is American history. No matter if it's gay, straight, Chinese, Japanese, black, white, it's all happened here. It's a part of American history. Black History Month is American History Month. Pride Month is American History Month. That's kind of my whole spiel about this. It's all happened here, so it's American history.
Absolutely. And you hit the nail on the head. It happened here, therefore it is. Well, James Lott Jr., it's about time to hit the road, man. Thank you so much for recommending this picture to me. The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson, available now on Netflix. But if the world want to catch up with you, for where there are millions of ways to do so, how would they go about doing that?
I'll be very specific this month because it's Pride Month. I'll be very careful. Very specific. So I know it's crazy. I have 2 series that are out this month that feature gay characters. One is called Fairview Heights. The lead character is gay and black, actually. His name is Daniel McPherson, as a friendship with a straight Latino man named Guillermo Rosales. So that is out now. We have 3 episodes out, more coming this month. And then Manchester Avenue also features gay characters in that too, and that's on JLJ Media. Both of those are all across any streaming service. You can listen to those. And there's like 4 episodes out on that one, 5 episodes on that one. And there are more episodes coming out this month. So check those out if you want to see some positive gay portrayals happening and gay messages that are relatable. I say check those out. I have other audio dramas too, but I'll save those for those this month. And I have music. All my music. I have very openly powerful music that's done by myself and others. Go to any streaming service, listen to that, or go to SoundCloud. I don't think it's SoundCloud, James Lott Jr., and it's all there with links to other places to listen to, but Spotify too and all that. But James Lott Jr. music. And of course, you follow me where all James Lott Jr.'s are. At James Lott Jr. on social media platforms, including TikTok. And today I realized my 1-year anniversary as an online network.
Clap it up.
I know. I'm like, I did it. JLJ Media is on YouTube, and I've over 35 shows, from Star Wars to Star being left-handed to Spanish content, all on there at JLJ Media, and that's my 1-year anniversary. I can't believe it. So this week.
It's been a while since I've been the left-handed show. I'm just putting it out there. I'm just saying.
Hey, it's fine.
Hey, this is Flobo Star on Netflix. We review things in the Netflix library. But if you want more content, become a member of the Boisterous Crew. Patreon.com/FloboBoys. Every month, I actually review comedy specials. I get to tell you, as a comedian, my thoughts on what's going on. But until next time, which will actually be later today if you listen to this one, this is Flobo Star on Netflix. Good night, everyone.